It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me on the Kim Hammer Show today. I think we've got a pretty informative show. I've got Senator Jonathan Dismayne on, who is the budget chair on the Senate side, to talk about revenue stabilization. And we're getting down to the final days of the session. One of the last things we do is vote out revenue stabilization as far as how the money gets spent and what kind of changes there are with regards to where your taxpayer dollars are going. So I thought it'd be a good thing to get Senator Dismayne on to talk about that. And then in the second half of the hour, we're going to have Representative Carlton Wing on. He is going to carry on a conversation about a couple things he got done this time with recycling, but also with the well, gosh, had a hammer moment there with the Senior Adult Protection Act, which actually I think Senator Dismayne, you helped carry it on the Senate side, didn't you?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Great bill by Representative Wing, and he put a lot of hard work into that. So I look forward to hearing from him.
Yeah, he is great to work with, which there's been a lot of good working relationships, I think, this time around between the Senate and the House. You know, it's kind of iron sharpening iron, sparring every once in a while, but for the most part, it seems like at the end of the day, we're all going to get to where we want to be. So, all right, first of all, Senator Dismayne, tell folks what geographical area you represent, and if you want to share anything about your family or anything personal that you feel like sharing, go ahead, just so people have a little bit of a comfort level about who Jonathan Dismayne is.
Yeah, so I live in Searcy, Arkansas, but my district stretches all the way from White County down to DeWitt in Arkansas County. So I've got a long, narrow district. It's incredibly unique, one I really, really enjoy. There's a lot of tradition in my district, and man, it's just been a blessing to be able to serve people there. As far as family, I've got two boys and a wife, Mandy, and they're ready for me to be done, I think, with the legislative session. We've had some late nights, as you know, here lately, and it'll be good to kind of get back into a more normal routine.
Yeah, Thursday night was a late night. I think we were in the chamber a total of about 8, maybe 9 hours, and
Yeah.
right. but it's that time of the session too that if you've been down there very long, you know that when it gets down to the end, just get ready because there are going to be some long days, longer than usual. But I think, as you mentioned, everybody's ready to get out of there, and probably the citizens are ready for us to get out of there too.
Yeah, there's a few pieces that need to get across the finish line. Some good pieces of legislation, I think, that are sitting out there, including RSA and what we're doing with our surplus dollars. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's time to get things wrapped up, get these last few items across the finish line, and I think we're going to have a really pretty successful session for the people of Arkansas.
I do too. The feedback has been strong, not necessarily from out of state, but out of state folks can't vote for us. But, we take care of Arkansas and Arkansans and, what is of interest to them. And I think that's what makes our state great. We're going to talk about what we refer to around the Capitol as RSA, which is Revenue Stabilization Act. And maybe in a minute, you can kind of give the history of when it was that we started having a balanced budget. And then what I want to do is get into some of the details of the budget, because I do think it's exciting where we are in history in the state of Arkansas and the direction that we're going under the leadership that we have, and how financially solid, how fiscally sound we are, with always room to improve. Now, if you want to, you can go up to the state website, which is www.arcleg.state.ar.us. That's arcleg.state.ar.us, and research this. Or you can go to my website. I'm going to get Elizabeth to put up the RSA final sheet that Senator Dismayne and I are going to be talking about. That's at the www.thekimhammershow.com, thekimhammershow.com, and we'll have the RSA sheet put up there so that you can follow along in the details that we're going to be talking about today on the Kim Hammer Show. First of all, Jonathan, just a little history lesson about RSA and when it got started, why it needed to be, and just some thoughts, because you are the Senate budget chair and you're very proficient in dealing with the numbers. So a little bit of history, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so our RSA, what it essentially says is we can't spend more than we take in, and the ultimate result of that is a balanced budget. You can think of the RSA schedules. When you kind of take a look at it, you're going to see some different columns, an A, B, C, D column. And so you can think of it as the way that we set our funding priorities is, so what's in Schedule A on that sheet, that's what we prioritize the most. B, the second, C, and so on. As far as how that's funded, you could think of it almost as pots and rain collection. The rain would be our revenues as they come in, and the pots are those different columns. And so once we have enough rain come in to catch and fund A, then we begin move on to fund B, so on and so forth until the rain stops or runs out, and some of those items aren't funded at the end of the day. We've had that happen over the last couple of cycles, mainly because we changed the forecast, revenue forecast, which constrained in the spending, and we left that constrained forecast in place until the last day of the fiscal year. Why that's valuable is that money was never made available to the state agencies that were really asked to grind, see what they could get away with or, could live with as far as revenues, or as far as their expenditures. They've been successful in doing that with the Governor Hutchinson. And so ultimately we are able to not, in this particular RSA, restate some of those expenditures that, were in a prior budget. And so we actually ended up with a cut, which is one of the first times, I think maybe since I've been here, that we've actually trimmed back down and had a substantial cut in our expenditures.
Now, I know this year the attitude on both, I think you and Senator Hickey, but on the House side, Lane Jean, who's been budget chair down there, I think for at least 3, maybe 4 cycles, and Speaker Shepherd, it seems like the common goal was to get as much money as we could into the long-term reserve fund and to the restricted fund. Talk a little bit about the history, because, it used to be we had what was called GIF, General Improvement Funds, and that went away, which is a good thing in my opinion. It went away. Talk a little bit, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the RSA. Talk a little bit though about why the change in direction, taking the money and trying to put it into what's called the restricted fund and also the long-term reserve, which you helped orchestrate getting set up several cycles. So give people a comfort level about the difference between GIF, restricted funds, and long-term funds and the benefits.
Yeah, so, and I'll kind of just kick off with my history on the long-term reserve. I served as pro tem a few cycles back, and was at a national conference. We're sitting around a room with some other pro tems, and they're giving a presentation on long-term reserves, the value of that, bond ratings, different things. And they came to a slide, and Arkansas was one of the yielding states. I think there may have been one other state that did not have any type of long-term reserve. And long-term reserves, what you think of is, that's your true savings for when things go south. If there's a true downturn in the economy, you need to have some things set aside that we're funding central services with. And so at that point, we started looking at ways, or I started looking at ways of how do we prioritize that? Prior to that, we just used all of our surpluses for what you call one-time projects. That was general improvement funds. There was a kind of a divvying up between the legislative body and the governor's office on, what the priority of those were. Some were legislatively driven, some were directly related to the governor and only at his discretion. We started making a shift in the change of that. Again, kind of went back to my first term as pro tem, Governor Hutchinson's first term as governor, where we said, look, courts have ruled that GIF is not constitutional, or the way that it had been utilized by legislators was not constitutional. Clearly, there was some also ethical issues that were associated with that for some of our members, not all, clearly not all. But what I said was, well, I think it would be appropriate if we had multiple levels of oversight. So we utilized what was there at the time, which was called the Rainy Day Fund. The Rainy Day Fund, prior to the change, required that the governor issue a letter for the request for the project, and that the Legislative Council, which is the body that meets when we're not in session, vote with a 51% majority before those funds could be released. That was kind of tweaked and changed through legislation and practice over the last couple of years, to where there was actually some money that was set aside for the governor to use at his own discretion. On a personal level, I had many conversations with the governor. I felt like that was out of what our agreement was. And so this session, we tried to rein that back in. We did that by utilizing a fund called the Restricted Reserve Fund. Traditionally, monies that went into that pot or that account required a letter from the governor and a 3/5 release by the legislative council before those funds could be expended. We this time actually set up different categories in revenue or in the restricted reserve. We allowed the governor to have some one-time money that he could utilize. It's about $18 million in total with just a review of the legislative council, but in about 10 million more, I believe, that was set aside in restricted reserve that would require a 51%, and the vast majority of the rest of that would require 3/5. We reorganized some of the priorities the governor had laid out in regards to surplus to accommodate what we were wanting to do as far as long-term reserve. And I mean, it's pretty incredible to say that, we will have an estimated $700 million in long-term reserve at the end of this fiscal year. So, come July 1st. That is truly going to have an impact, not just on our bond rating, but our ability to cut taxes really for the people of Arkansas. That gives us a backstop in case there is a downturn, that we have something to rely on, or if we've missed the calculation when we're making some tax cuts. But again, lots of exciting things happen, and I'll let you kind of get back to the questions. I'm sorry, I went along probably a little too much on that.
No, once you're on a roll, you got to roll because it's good information for people to have. The one thing I think people need to understand, our total amount of tax cut this time around, what's the final total?
Well, we had $179 million that was associated with the PPP loan forgiveness. We had $3.1 million that was for the unemployment, removing the tax on unemployment benefits. That's temporary. And then the other was about $25 million for the tax cuts that were legislatively driven. Those go all the way from exempting the water use in poultry houses to adding $4 million to our historic rehabilitation program here in the state. So you can think of that as your downtown areas, that revitalization that's occurring. This will help continue to spur that, and a number of other items in that. But again, in total, so you had the 179, the 3.1, and then the 25 million in cuts just for this year. The goal is, because what we were able to do with the long-term reserve and also tamping down about $50 million worth of expenses, is that we're going to be in an incredible spot to come back for a special session right around the fiscal session and have a discussion about making some real change to our income tax structure. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about this budget and what we've been able to do, and really looking forward to having a great discussion on what we're going to do long term on income taxes.
Well, and I think that's that is a compliment to leadership, but I think all the legislators, the vast majority, have been behind the process, because we're actually laying the groundwork that we can do long-term sustainable tax cuts. I know, some other states kind of got eager beaver and ended up getting themselves in trouble. And yeah, we all want to cut taxes, and we want to get it down, as thin of a wire as we can, so that, the government can still provide essential services, but not, be growing government at the same time. But I do think that we're positioned that long-term sustainability, that the next generation of legislators that'll come back the next time will be able to aggressively begin to do it without having to hit the reverse engine switch and back up. Is that not kind of the goal of what we've been working for?
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, I just want to take a second too to talk about what the Senate did. And I'm not going to be bashful about saying it. I mean, that's what led us to kind of the situation we're in. We've talked for years in that caucus about trying to have a plan. Sometimes we would have a small one in regards to the budget, I should say, and in taxation. We would have some small plans, but nothing significant. This year, we got together as a Senate caucus, Republican caucus, and actually said this is going to be our priorities. We need everybody to be on board. There is no special project. There is no special funding for any member. The goal is long-term reserve. The goal is making sure we have oversight of one-time money. And the goal is to generate savings. And nothing against anything that happened in the House, but I think we truly led on those issues this session, and that's why we're sitting where we are. That's a testament to Senator Hickey and, again, the caucus for not wavering. There were plenty of chances in this session for folks to kind of go a different direction. But members had pledged, and members stuck to that commitment. And the outcome, like I said, it's something that we've not done since I've been here, and I've probably been here longer than I should have.
Well, I do. Yeah, no, I'm, but you know what? I think, like the Bible says, for such appointed time. And I think the leadership of the Senate and the camaraderie, and also nobody peeled off, and nobody allowed themselves, and this is important, nobody allowed themselves to get peeled off by any special offers or any special deals. And
that's right.
That's the perfect combination to get done what we're getting done this time as far as the budget. And it's a lot funner to play offense than it is play defense.
Right.
And I think that's what we've been doing. So, and I'm going to tell you this, you didn't ask me to tell you this, people are going to think I'm buttering you up, but the reality is I think you and Senator Hickey are a perfect combination because of your personalities and your determination that stayed the course to get us in the position that we are finishing up this session with regards. Let me hit you about a couple things, and then what I want to do is I just kind of want to scroll down the numbers because Elizabeth's working on getting this up. And just a note, the show is actually out Facebook Live right now. This week I'm going to start pre-recording the show so I can have my Saturdays off, just to be honest with you. And we will pre-record the show, and it will still play Saturday at noon. It's just that we're trying to get all the arrangements worked out. So the show, I just found out from some listeners, is going out live right now. It'll be played tomorrow. And so, anyway, just know that. So let me ask you, because I did have one listener text me a question, and the question was this. We want to know how legislators plan to have oversight with both the $550 million surplus and the huge amount of federal money that will be available coming down the line.
Yeah, and well, you were instrumental in the second part of that. So that's really what you need to touch on, I think. The nuts and bolts of that as well as anybody. On the money that's set aside in the long-term reserve, that's actually legislative. So there has to be a true downturn in the economy. We have to come in and actually approve the release of those funds. And so it's got a really tight lockbox that's associated with those funds. Like I said, there's different components in the restricted reserve. So that's a separate fund. We put it was over $100 million. I don't have the list with me.
I want to say 139. I don't know why that number may be right or wrong, but
139.5, I think, is what we put in there. Part of that was just to make sure we're in a volatile economy, make sure something doesn't happen. And so we've got a backstop that we can quickly release if we need to. Another part of that was for some projects the governor had outlined in his balanced budget proposal back, in November. But we felt like some of those funds, some of those issues could be taken care of through the CARES Act money and some of the federal money, and would allow us later on to be able to sweep that into the long-term reserve and keep building that up. And so that's really your oversight. There's a 3/5 for the vast majority that's in restricted reserve. There's a small pot that the governor can release with 51% of legislative council. And some of it, one of the things we did, we had a bond that was sitting out there for prisons that only had 2 payments left. Because we had the cash on hand, we made the decision to go ahead and pay that off. And I think that was around $14 million, if I remember correctly. But so we just did some things, I think, to really tighten up and ensure that, hey, everyone's going to have a say in how these funds are going to be utilized. And for the long-term reserve in particular, again, prior legislation drives how those funds are to be spent.
Yeah, and I've got the sheet pulled up. It was items A, requiring a majority approval vote by ALC prior to the release funds, $15 million. And then the 3/5 is $133,500,000. Then the state police, $3 million vehicles set aside. Economic stimulus program set aside, $5.8 million. And Department of Correction lease payments, I think that's what you're talking about, those 2 payments left, $14,105,000 for a total of $171,405,000. That's the restricted reserve fund?
That's the restricted reserve fund. That's correct.
Okay. Now, the long-term reserve fund, by the time we've done everything that we're doing, we're going to end up with, if I'm reading it right, $711,188,000. Right. Does that sound right?
That is. And, some of that will change. And so hopefully we'll actually, still be trending above our forecast. And so come July 1st, I anticipate that that's even going to be a higher number than what we have on the paper there. And again, I just think that's an incredible testament to the legislative body. Some further discussion on tax cuts, in particular income tax cuts.
Well, and one thing about the long-term reserve, and I don't think we hit on this, is the long-term reserve, not only besides the restricted reserve, which if you add those two together, we're talking about $1 million on hand. The though is what our bond rating as they
Right.
talk about that for a second, because I know well, I think that you wanted to get the long-term reserve fund, our bond rate.
Also, certain agencies have the ability to issue bonds, and so there is debt, and technically for the state of Arkansas, and so we pay interest on that debt. And the lower that interest rate is, the more that we're going to be able to, again, affect tax cuts and making sure that there's less money being spent, more money available for that. And so right now, we were told that we would need approximately $500 million in long-term reserve before we could impact our bond. And from the sheet, we should be well above that, which means we get to restructure that debt. We get to have a lower rate, and again, less money being spent to pay for that debt obligation that's out there. Again, I just think that's the right direction to go. That's one that puts us in a better position, and one we should be proud of.
The talking about that and about, the plans to give tax cuts in the future. Of course, unfortunately, we also have to look at the reality of the health insurance side to the state employees, teachers,
right.
EBD, and all that. And that's the 100,000-foot view, is that we also realize that there's some economic impacts, we'll say, from the budget that are coming, that we need to make allowances to without having to get into the long-term reserve or the restricted fund, because we want those things to continue to grow. Number one, it gives us, strong fiscal responsibility, but it also helps in other ways, such as the bond rating.
Right.
I got about 5-6 minutes with you, and I really appreciate you taking time out, calling in today. And you're right. We all work together as a team to get the emergency, package through. Working with the governor, he was very cooperative on the Emergency Powers Act. One of the things that was in that was a financial component, that for all this federal money that's coming down, that we will work in conjunction with the administrative branch, but we will actually have to see a plan that's going to be developed that will be presented to ALC in order for that money to be dispersed prior to. And I remember distinctly sitting in a committee meeting, and you were pounding on DFA because I forgot what one particular area it was of that last batch of money came through, that you were wanting to know, what's the plan?
Right.
So I think moving forward, for all that federal money that'll be coming down with what we've got in place legislatively now, they will be required to put a plan together that we will have final approval over. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that goes back to, we had some agencies that got ahead of themselves in regards to some programs they were trying to create with the CARES Act money. And the fact that they got ahead of themselves, I didn't feel like we had really done the best by even the federal government with the utilization of those tax dollars. If we were able to have had a discussion earlier on in the process, I think we would have been able to explain some of the concerns that citizens told us about. Those were our impacted businesses in particular, and it would, again, have just a better outcome. That's why it's important to have a plan. We talked about having a plan just a little bit ago in regards to what we did with our surplus dollars, what we did with our budget. And again, the outcome, I think, is tremendous. I think that's just an example of what happens when you have good, solid footing and you're able to have a conversation about setting priorities and having buy-in from the members. One thing I should have said earlier, too, I mentioned the Republican caucus. And again, that's where this started from in regards to the budget and surplus. But I mean, to the credit of the Democrats in the Senate, they also bought in completely on that plan. They did not waver, and really stuck with us on ensuring that this was the roadmap that we wanted to have followed, the one that we pushed with the governor's office in the House. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that they were also good. You know, they were good participants and really players in that whole discussion.
Well, and I think as far as the atmosphere, which we had a late night Thursday night, and I was talking to some of the staff. I went by the Capitol earlier, and you know, one of the things, us taking a dinner break and just going back there and just having a picnic, basically, kind of broke the tension a little bit. But I know some people have watched some of the videos of the Senate session this year. They think, my God, we hate each other. But in reality, we are finishing strong, I think, as far as being pretty unified. Now, obviously, there's going to be some areas that, you know, that people in the chamber, even among their own parties, won't agree with some members of their own party on. But at the end of the day, I do agree with you. I think the one thing that has unified us as a Senate chamber, and I think to the House side as well, but we're senators, we'll speak about the Senate side, is that we have all come together where we're going to leave feeling good about the direction we're going in financially as far as having solid footing to stand on. And that is one thing that ought to be bipartisan support, is that we want to make sure we leave it better than we found it.
Well, and that's our number one priority as legislators. You know, that budget that's our job. And we file a lot of other bills, and a lot of other bills are important, but our number one priority is to set those spending thresholds for the state and be engaged in that discussion on RSA. And so I was glad to see that we reverted back and made that priority. That was our first discussion as a caucus. And again, something that I hope we replicate as we move forward and we stay as engaged as we are today.
All right. One last question, and I got to go after this. Heidi's giving me the look. One more question. As far as the growth of the budget overall, where are we on the growth of the budget overall? It's great that we're parking money in restricted reserve. It's great that we're parking money in long-term reserve. We are kind of in what I would refer to as a financial anomaly with all the federal money that's coming to the state, the spin-off out of that. You know, we're riding high as far as the economy, you know, coming back strong, which I'll give Trump credit for laying the groundwork for that. We knew it was going to happen. But what about the overall growth of the budget and government itself by the numbers?
Yeah, and just big whole dollars. Budget's going to set at about $5.8 billion right now. We were able to actually put additional money in K through 12 that, you know, at a rate that we've not done before. So there's growth in particular areas that, you know, we're constitutionally mandated to do, but also where we wanted to set priorities. But in the scheme at the end of the day, in the scheme of things, you know, we affected the budget by about $50 million at the end of the day. We slowed some of the growth that would have otherwise existed in Medicaid and some other agencies. And again, that if we're not spending those dollars, that's more dollars that are made available for tax cuts and priorities of the legislative body and the governor's office. And again, so we've actually, like I said, it's probably one of the more exciting sessions, at least since I've been here, on having a real conversation about the budget, you know, taking the governor's proposed balanced budget and then finding places that we can agree to cut.
All right. One last thing. We do have a piece of legislation going through also that if it gets through the House end in the last couple of days, I think it's going to put some general pressure on the administrative branch too, whoever that is. And that is, we have defined what savings means. And I think that's critical for us to have that standard definition so that both sides, administrative and legislatively, when we talk about numbers, we talk about, you know, shrinking government, we talk about, you know, what shared services, Department of Transformation, all the agencies, when we say savings, this is what we mean, and this is how it translates into real dollars. I think put that in the mix of things, and it's really exciting time to be there. All right. Any final words?
No, I think we're good. I appreciate the time, and I think it's time to get out of the well.
Yes, it is. Let's go home. Thank you. Senator Jonathan Dismayne lives in Searcy, represents the area from there down to Stuttgart. He is also the Senate chair of the Senate Budget Committee. Appreciate his work. And when we come back, we'll have Representative Carlton Wing. We're going to talk about elder fraud, and a bill that he's run along with a couple other ones I think are going to be interesting, especially if you have elderly parents or elderly members of your family. This is the Kim Hammer Show. We'll be back in a couple minutes. Good afternoon. This is Kim Hammer on the Kim Hammer Show. And right now, my guest is going to be Carlton Wing, State Representative Carlton Wing. We had on the first part of the hour Jonathan Dismain, State Senator, who is the budget chair for the Senate end. And we've been talking about finances. If you want to go up there and look at what we call the RSA sheet, Revenue Stabilization Act sheet, I'll have it on my website at the KimHammerShow.com. The KimHammerShow.com. We'll try to get that loaded up today where you can go up there and you can see the numbers kind of broken down in bite-sized forms. Also, always remember that if you want to check out any legislation, you can go up to the state website, which is www.arcleg.state.ar.us, and you can find all the legislators, the legislation that they sponsored, and all the details about the legislative session. All right, right now, let's bring on State Representative Carlton Wing. Thank you for joining me on the Kim Hammer Show today, Carlton.
Great to be here.
Are you enjoying a little bit of a break since this last week?
Yes, yeah, very much. The weekends are precious, very precious to us.
Well, and I thank you for giving up some time, but I know you've run some legislation. Actually, you talked about on the Kim Hammer Show, 3-4 weeks ago, that's now become reality, and it's dealing with elder fraud. In fact, I had Senator Jonathan Dismain on just before you, and he was actually the Senate sponsor of that. So perfect timing that y'all would both be on the show at the same time. But go into greater detail now that it's reality about elder fraud, because that is a big problem, not only in the state of Arkansas, but also in the nation. So go into the devil in the details of what the bill is and how people need to know it works so that they can utilize it.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that really affects people personally. And I got involved personally, and I'd mentioned this before. Somebody very close to me was a victim of elder fraud and had almost her entire life savings drained in a matter of months. And as I was working with her, I became aware of just how big a problem this is. $37 billion, that's billion with a B, $1 billion annually in the nation is fraudulently taken out of our seniors' retirement accounts. And and about 50% of that comes from people that are unknown to the victim. They could be out of the country, the Jamaica, Nigeria, things like that. Those kind of email scams that we get used to, but also people within the country are doing the same thing. So 50% are unknown to the victim. The other 50% are caregivers. And so whether it's family members or people who are taking care of the person can take advantage of a situation. And so what we did was we crafted House Bill 1391, and we were able to put together a group of people who could deal with all aspects of this. So on the financial services side, we now have empowered banks to be able to put a hold on suspicious activity. What we found in investigating this is that the banks are typically the first people to know something fishy is happening. Something doesn't look right here, but legally they weren't able to raise their hand and do anything about it. And so now they have the ability to raise their hand and do something about it. Like if you've ever had a credit card charge denied, something just looks a little bit out of sorts. Sometimes your credit card will deny a charge. They'll contact you and say, Mr. Wing, did you intend to buy this? And then if I say yes, then that's good. But if not, then we can start the path to figure out what happened. And so the same thing can happen here. The banks are able to step in, raise their hand, say something doesn't look good here, and they can contact the law enforcement. So we can. The Attorney General was very excited about getting behind this, and now we can engage the services of the Attorney General's office much sooner with this involved. And then on the other side, for the caregivers, we've got the DHS, Adult Protective Services. When they see something suspicious, they now have the ability and the mandate within 48 hours to let the authorities know. Because the common theme in all of this, whether it's an unknown perpetrator or a known perpetrator, the common theme is you've got to get in sooner. Because by the time the right people were finding out, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars were already gone from the account, and that'll never be recovered.
Okay, and I do remember at the press conference, Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, who has helped out quite a bit in this, along with her office, to make it happen, because she deals with fraud all the time. This is bringing a new option to the menu, if you would, to help in this vulnerable population. But what about just give me a couple real life examples and let me kind of pitch you a softball. So, bank teller. Somebody comes in and some activity, somebody wants to present a check. How is this bill going to play out, say, in the example of a bank teller or somebody at the bank, and how is it going to make a difference?
The great thing is that most banks know their customers. And so they can say, Mr. Wing, this is not something that you normally do. Why is it that you want $10,000 in cash to be placed in an envelope? You said you're going to mail it to somebody, and they can start asking some questions about that. And just in so doing, they can alert the right people to possibly even let that person know, hey, by the way, are you aware that you do not have to? Here's a real world example. And in fact, this is the exact example that got me into this. Friend of mine, 80 plus years old, was convinced that she had won the lottery, had been told, you have won the lottery. The only thing we need to release the $18 million to you is you just need to pay the taxes on it. You pay the taxes and it's going to be $5,000. You give us that $5,000 and we will give you $18 million. Well, she was thrilled, absolutely thrilled, not aware that this was a scam from the beginning. And what happens is they get you on the hook for $5,000, and then they tell you about another fee that needs to happen and another fee. And about the time that you think you might be getting scammed, you are already psychologically hooked because you don't want to admit that you have just been taken and you've already invested $10,000 perhaps in this fraudulent activity. And so you keep going, just hoping that the next time it's actually going to work out. And it never does. It never does. And so what they do is they'll get your cash, and then they start having you buy gift cards. They say, if you can go down to your local Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, and get $2,000 in gift cards and bring them back and tell us the serial numbers on the back of those gift cards. Once you do that, boom, you've lost that money too. It's gone. They've got what they need. And so they will take your cash on hand, then they talk you out of your investment accounts, and then they'll go all the way to talking people into taking a second mortgage on their house. So that by the time these scammers are done, you are literally penniless and you don't have a home to stay in.
You know, I remember when the press conference was going on. I do not remember her name. You probably do. The little old lady, sweet
Yes.
lady. She was up in her 80s, if I remember right.
Yes.
Came and testified or gave a public statement, and she acknowledged that one of the big things that, and you mentioned that psychological warfare a minute ago, was she said a lot of reasons my friends or people that she knew that had been scammed were afraid to come forward was because they were embarrassed that at their age that they had been taken advantage of and they had been suckered in. And that's got to be part of the process of somebody who's going to be preying on these individuals, is to use not only that intimidation and that fear, but that embarrassment aspect that people are afraid to come forward and say, it happened to me.
That's true, and that's what makes this crime so much more painful for those of us who see what is happening. It's truly sad. It's truly tragic because these people live their whole lives doing the right thing, living beneath their means and saving, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. And then you get into the later stages of life, you're trusting, you're a kind-hearted person, somebody calls, they strike up a conversation with you, and they're building you up to try to build this relationship of trust with one key. That's all they're trying to do, is to take your money. And what has happened is these seniors fall for it. They get embarrassed. But then what's also happening is sometimes these seniors are taken advantage of when they might not be in the same mental cognitive state that they were when they were in their 40s. And so things sound a little bit better or a little bit different at this time, and all that money is gone before anybody can do anything about it. And I'll tell you also what has accelerated this is COVID-19, because you took this group of people and then they became isolated. They were afraid to leave their homes, which gave them more access. From the scammers' point of view, they were able to reach them, and they were more lonely, so they were more desirous to have somebody to talk to. And in the cases that I've talked to, these people will talk to you for 2 or 3 hours, develop a friend. Sending out checks and more checks and buying things and those gift cards. And I'll give a lot of credit to the folks at some of these convenience stores and department stores that sell gift cards. Good cashiers are starting to become more and more aware of what's going on and trying to stop that at the point of purchase when they see, especially seniors, coming in with large gift card items, saying, now, what are you doing with this? Or you're not going to call somebody and give them these serial numbers, are you? And sometimes they're able to stop that just right there. And I'll tell you, since we had our press conference, just alerting banks to what's going on, we have 2 instances where just that first week where they called the Attorney General's office, and in one case, a $20,000 transaction was stopped that was headed $1,000 to that senior who had gotten a little confused.
Sweet. I kind of compare this to in the medical field, what would be HIPAA. You've kind of broken down the HIPAA wall a little bit to where this law is actually going to allow those individuals, like at the bank or, the convenience store, that they now have permission to talk to people, whereas before they were prohibited from talking to people about that. Is that kind of a fair analogy or a good comparison?
Yeah, what it does is it gives them the opportunity to contact law enforcement when something is suspicious. So the Attorney General's office can be notified. I mean, the FBI was involved with the creation of this. Well, I say the FBI. We took advice from law enforcement, and the FBI deals with this all the time. And so when we filed this bill 3 months ago, just to get, we didn't do with it because I wanted it to sit out there. And I heard you mentioned to your listeners, you can go to ArcLeg, to the legislative website. You can look up all the bills. I filed it and let it sit there purposefully so people could see the topic of what I was trying to address. And then people would come to me and say, hey, we've got something to contribute to this discussion. And we ended up with quite a large group between the Attorney General's office, DHS, the Arkansas Bankers Association, the Arkansas Credit Union Association. The people came on board to share their part and to provide input for this. We were able to take best practices from other states and put it all into something that works here in Arkansas. And that's truly a large group of people coming together because all of these people had something that they knew about to help try to solve this. Because, like I say, $37 billion, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. All right, so you gave me the illustration about the bank, the teller, which, I know a lot of people, especially in the elderly population, I think they get into the habit of going to the same place for the same needs, whether that's to a particular grocery store or to, a particular convenience store to buy their gas or drugstore or, anywhere else for that matter. They're kind of in that comfort zone of going there. How are we going to get this information out to people? And when you say they can call law enforcement, how is this going to be promoted among the businesses so they know who to call, and what is the mechanism and to who? I know you said the Attorney General, but has she set up a hotline number over there? How all is that going to work?
Yes, yeah. So there is a hotline for the Attorney General's office. Becoming law makes this much more, a part of the discussion now amongst the financial services community, because now this is law. This is going to be part of their practice. And this, of course, was with the input and incredible help from the Arkansas Bankers Association. We had lots of bankers participating. We had weekly conferences. Every Wednesday, we had an afternoon meeting with this group from about February, late January on, all the way through until we filed this bill. So they're on board. They want this. They want to protect their customers. They want to protect their customers from the fraud. They want to protect their assets. And when money is stolen, it doesn't do anybody any good. So they're involved with this, to be able to do this. But also, we have filed what's called an ISP, an interim study proposal. So in the interim, after this session ends, getting ready for the next session, we're going to be looking at the long-term things of what else we can do. And awareness is a huge component. We need more and more people to be aware of what these scammers are doing and what types of tricks not to fall for. Because while I just talked about the lottery, that's a common one. IRS scams. People will call and say, you owe back taxes, and so you need to give us money right now. When we had the ice storm, people would call and say, we're with the utilities department. We're going to cut your heat. You haven't paid your bill. You send us $500 right now. There's romance scams. I think we talked about that last time. Trust me, you're not talking to that gal who you think you're trading emails with. That's some big burly guy from Russia who's just taking your money. There are lots of ways that they get in. But here's one thing that we need to get out to everybody. Anybody that asks you to go buy a gift card and to call them to take a picture of that gift card or give them those serial numbers, that is not a legitimate business enterprise at all. Don't do that. And a lot of people will get confused with that. No, the IRS is never going to do that. No state entity is ever going to do that. No city utilities department is ever going to do that. That is a scammer.
So when are we going to be ready to give a number to people or promote this? I know we signed this passed the Senate last night. It's been enrolled, sent to the governor. Hopefully he'll get it signed in the next week after he has a chance to review it. Of course, you getting all the key players on the table, to the table on board is huge. So hopefully this will get signed in the next week. When do you anticipate that we'll be able to give information out to people?
I think within your listeners know this is a big issue that's kind of flown under the radar. A lot of people are unaware of it, but I can tell you, once we made this public, I started hearing from more and more people across the state who have been victims of this within their family, and have seen the very harmful effects that it's done to parents and grandparents, again, who had done everything right their whole lives, and then in a moment of weakness gave it all away. It truly is tragic to be in a much better position to stop this a lot sooner.
Okay, let's do this. As soon as you get it all pulled together, let me know. I'll get you back on the show for about 10 minutes. We'll talk about getting it out, and then I'll get it up to the KimHammerShow.com website so people can go up there and access that information, and we'll know that it's coming. I got about 3 minutes. You ran a couple other pieces of legislation dealing with recycling. Just give me in about a minute, minute and a half, what those pieces of legislation did.
I'll tell you what, it's pretty exciting. Senate Bill 585 deals with e-waste, which is e-waste is computers, cell phones,
printers,
any kind of electronic equipment, printers, things like that. But it only takes up about 2% of the landfills, but it's about 70% of the hazardous waste in those landfills. And so we've tried to figure out a way to not have that happen. That's harmful to the environment, and it's a waste of a resource because e-waste actually has a monetary value. So what we did was we created a public-private partnership, and we're setting it up through Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, where the state of Arkansas will have all of its e-waste go through this public-private partnership, and that monetary value just from the state's e-waste will be able to fund the entire program so that we can bring more awareness to the rest of the state to recycle their e-waste as well, because currently only 12% of the e-waste is ever recycled, so it ends up in those landfills. So we can do a better job of promoting this at no cost to the state, because the state's resources of just their e-waste will pay for the entire program. So that was Senate Bill 585. That passed through the House and Senate. The governor signed it actually yesterday, so that is now a law. And the other one involves advanced recycling. Advanced recycling is when you take some plastics that we can't currently recycle and other things like styrofoam and things like that. If we break it down to the molecular component, then you actually can recycle that stuff. But it's a newer type of technology. And so what we did with this bill, this is House Bill 1944 that just passed off the House yesterday, and it will clear through the Senate. Senator Flippo's carrying that Monday and Tuesday. What that will do is allow us to establish definitions for this topic of advanced recycling. Some of our neighboring states, Texas and Tennessee, have gotten hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in advanced recycling. It, again, saves our resources, but also provides some economic impact as well. So we're trying to catch up to those and keep up with our other neighboring states. Both Louisiana and Oklahoma have passed this bill in their current session. So we need to keep up, and we need to let the recyclers, especially these advanced recyclers, know that Arkansas is a great place to come and do business.
Good deal. All right. You've been listening on the Kim Hammer Show to Representative Carlton Wing, and you cover what area, Carlton?
North Little Rock and Sherwood. I've got the northern part of North Little Rock and the southern part of Sherwood.
Good deal. Well, they're blessed to have you. I know you work hard at the Capitol because I've seen you work hard and you work with as far as team players. So we'll get you back on as soon as all that other information comes out about the elder fraud. And thank you for watching out for our elderly population the way you have. All right. You've been listening to the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM The Answer. That was State Representative Carlton Wing, and then previously had Senator Jonathan Dismain. I think you'll enjoy the next couple shows that are coming up. Some of y'all are watching Facebook Live right now. We are going to start recording this week so I can get my Saturdays off, just to be honest with you. And it'll be played on the regular time, Saturday at noon. And you will be back next Saturday, hopefully, to watch that. We appreciate you listening to the Kim Hammer Show today. Hope that you're better educated, better informed, and that'll make you a better Arkansan. Have a great day.